Well, at the time of the great powers, at this period, when you have monetary problems and collapses, 1933 to 1947, this is really setting the stage for World War II, we get models that the great powers have for continental blocks. In other words, these world power is going to be controlled in the near future by whoever can restructure and control the continental blocks. This is discussed on pages 364 and 365 of Quigley. And the Allies and the Axis powers end up with competing models. So when sometimes people talk about, oh, a tiny mustache man had his plan for the world order, that's correct, and that's referring to differing models of continental blocks. The Axis approach favored things like hierarchy, structure, and tradition, whereas the Western powers, the Allies, favored the liberal structure, liberalization, liberal powers, and so forth. This is discussed explicitly on page 365. Everybody, I mean, like, if you have the book, just look. It's right there. So, you know, a lot of times World War II is cashed out as, oh, it's the free West versus the tyrannical Axis powers. However, in reality, both the Axis and Ally powers are looking for competing global models, you see. That's the key point here. So really, the battle at this period is a battle between two models of internationalism. One with the axis of a kind of top-down actual FASCIST versus the Western model, which was a liberal Enlightenment, neoliberal, negative rights approach, right? And that actually does fit with Fabian socialism. So you could really say that people talk about, oh, the 20th century is a battle between capitalism and communist fascism. Really, it's a battle of Fabian socialist Keynesian economics and then the Axis powers model of a different structure for world order. And you're correct, actually three models, right? You could talk about three models. You could talk about the democratic capitalist order. You could talk about a kind of socialist order, communist Marxism, socialism, Fabian socialism, and a kind of FASCIST model. Those are kind of the three models. And obviously the third position didn't win out. Exactly where we are right now, it's difficult to determine because it looks like it's a battle between a kind of democratic capitalism and a kind of Fabian socialism. And those two things even might sort of meld into some hellhole. Who knows? It's difficult to say exactly where we're going, although we do know where they plan to go. So, what book are we covering? We're covering Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. This is a kind of overview, and I want to do an overview because I want to situate the big events that just occurred in the last few days in the past, in the big meta political picture, because we want to understand what does this mean, what does this symbolize, where are we going from here. The next section is international socialism. And so we see the Bolshevik Revolution happening. We see Stalinism. And he doesn't mention, that's a good, does he actually even mention the Fabian socialists? Let's see if he does. I'm not sure. He may mention them, or he may just kind of class it under the bigger picture of socialism. And I would argue that really Kalergi is another one of these figures that are kind of Fabian socialist, if you're not aware. And Quigley does say in Anglo-American Establishment that the Royal Society elites did hear and adopt, to a degree, the Kalergi plan. Let's see if he mentions Fabian socialism. Even if he doesn't mention it by name, when he mentions the Rhodes-Milner group, it's the same stuff. Rothschild group. And the Ratu book, by the way, is a necessary appendix to these books, right? That's why it helps fill in a lot of the blanks since 1966, right? Because Tragedy Note comes out in 1966. Anglo-American Establishment comes out in it's much later, 81. And Ratu's book is just a few years old, so it kind of paints the rest of this picture since, the rest of Quigley's writings. And yes, for those that are always bitching, Ratu does include the role of Middle Eastern countries, and not even those Middle Eastern foreign allies, but also Islam. Islam plays a role in this, right? You can't leave. They're not the victims. They're not the heroes, right? As they always act like. I want to see if under the heading of socialism, if he mentioned Fabian socialism. It really doesn't matter because, just anything to do with John Maynard Keynes is all the same stuff. So, man, it's a massive ass index. So it's taking me forever just to find socialism as a heading. He just mentions the First International, Second International, so he doesn't mention it explicitly. Socialism is a reaction to laissez-faire Enlightenment democratic ideas, but it's not a reaction in the sense of an attempt to move into something conservative or right-wing. People misunderstand when they hear that, or they think of, communism as this, as a necessarily leftist. And it's true that when Marx started out, he tried to appeal to and work with what are called liberal magazines. But in reality, as we get into the Cold War, when we get to the period of the NKVD and Stalinism, Sovietism is anti-liberal, meaning that it's opposed, and Marx was too in certain ways. For example, some things he liked, like Marx was pro-free trade. People don't know that, but he thought that would further the revolution. In other areas, he was socially liberal because that would further whatever furthers the revolution, right? But when it comes to what we know of as Enlightenment liberalism, which is laissez-faire economics, which is Ricardo, Adam Smith, John Locke, that kind of stuff, Immanuel Kant. Enlightenment liberal economic theory is what Marxism sets itself against. So it's in a dialectical opposition with that economic theory. And thus, it can be it can have a right-wing version, fascism, or a left-wing version, socialism, Marxism. Because you can have an opposition to international liberal capital in two different ways. Originally, though, Marxism and socialism were allied with anarcho-syndicalism, and this is, who's that guy? Marx used to be buddies with him, and then Marx, suddenly hated him and started making fun of him. And by the way, he talks about dialectics, right? And Marx utilizes the dialectics against Enlightenment liberalism, he thinks, to push the eventual success of Marxism. And this is why you hear me talking about dialectics, right? It's on page 378, clear as day. I don't know if people think I just make all this stuff up, or I have no idea what I'm talking about. I just say words. They don't have any meaning. Literally, that's what people say in the comments. Who was the famous anarcho-syndicalist that Marx was buddies with, and then they parted ways? I know somebody in the chat will remember. He's like is it? Yes, I think he's a Russian guy. It's not Proudhon. It's Bakunin. Is it Bakunin? I think it's Bakunin. But from the early days, they had to split ways because no, it's not. It might be Kropotkin. It's not Proudhon. He was just the atheist. It's Bakunin, I think. Yeah. Anyway. What Quigley doesn't, I don't recall if he actually goes too deep into, but I don't think Quigley's aware of the Western elite funding Trotsky and Lenin. I don't recall Quigley talking about that, but eventually that is verified and vindicated in Anthony Sutton. And for those that doubt it, did you know that Zbigniew Brzezinski quotes Anthony Sutton on that very point? Yes, that's correct. In Between Two Ages, Brzezinski even cites Anthony Sutton. A lot of this is the inner structure of the Cheka and the Soviet party. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. It's interesting. It's definitely cool for like a, Cold War analysis. But yes, they gave Trotsky and Lenin trains and full of gold and money. Absolutely. And by the way, Woodrow Wilson was a big aider and supporter of all that. So. Interestingly, he does mention German communism and the structure of the almost secret society nature of the communists and the Spartacist Union. And why was it called the Spartacist Union? Well, because Adam Weishaupt called himself Spartacus. That was his code name. And the reason that matters is that Adam Weishaupt was a communist, if you don't know. And that's why communism celebrates May Day. Okay, so I'm going to skip over. It's basically a chapter on German communism, not just Russian, but German communism. Then he gets to some interesting first mentions of Tiny Mustache Man. Who's funding Tiny Mustache Man to build up the war machine? Well, it turns out first he says the industrialists. And most likely the industrialists felt like this person could be good if we end up in a war and money could be made from a war. The Tiny Mustache Men supporters originally, in opposition to the Reds and the communists in Germany in the late 20s and 30s, were not really right-wing. In fact, the NSDA, whatever, NSDAP, I forget the full German name, began as a revolutionary left party. Now, I know that right-wingers love to tout this, but it's actually true, right? So you don't have to correct me on, oh, here he goes talking about how we're not the real liberals and the Nazis are the real socialists. That's actually true. Is there an example of what? Yes, read the book. He lists all of these things in the book. For example, on page 436, he lists it again. Fritz Thyssen, for example. August Borsig. Emil Kirchhoff. Albert Wulger. These are all industrialists beginning to support what was at that time called the lunatic fringe. From 1924 to 1930, the party, we're talking about the Tiny Mustache Man, almost, not exactly yet, this is right around the time of the beer hall putsch, but they had it was a pro-workers party, the German Workers' Party, in 1920. The party's platform was pan-Germanism, German international equality, abrogating the Treaty of Versailles, the Lebensraum program of the living space for Germans, including colonies. German citizenship is based on strict blood-only rules and laws. No naturalization, no immigration. All other people groups should be deported, removed, etc. All unearned incomes to be abolished, which I guess that means like welfare. I'm not exactly sure. I guess that means welfare. The state control of all monopolies. That's an interesting one. And that might be why some of the industrialists supported this, right? Now, it's possible that industrialists believed in this party line, but it's also possible that some of the industrialists supported a position where, well, I'm going to vote for the guys that are going to take over these things because I can pay for play, right? Hillary Clinton didn't invent pay to play, okay? State controls of all companies deemed monopolies, impose an excess profit tax on corporations to have corporate communism of large department stores. I don't know what that means unless perhaps they saw that as a way to undermine Jewish department stores. I'm not sure what that means. To communalize department stores. Encourage small business with the allotment of government contracts. Take agricultural land to provide old age pensions. Punish war profiteers and usury with death. And ensure that press, education, culture, and religion conform to the ideals of the German race. So you'll notice it's not Catholicism that they put there. It's the ideals of the German race, which could be, I don't know, Teutonic paganism. It's not exactly clear what that is. That's the 1920 party line. And the corporations supporting this are listed as Carl Bechstein, the piano company, August Borsig, the Berlin car company, Emil Kirdorf, the Westphalian coal syndicate, Fritz Thyssen, the steel company, Albert Vugler, the German iron and steel company. And so that's where we get the rise of Tiny Mustache Man. So there's a lot that could be said here in this chapter on World War II. I'm going to skip to exactly what he says that is very controversial. When I talk about this, this makes people really mad. I'm just going to tell you what he says. I don't care if you agree or disagree with Quigley, but there does seem to be good reasoning to think that the reason that the Royal Society elites would want Tiny Mustache Man to come to power to have a war would, in the long run, back up these aspirations. And that includes later developments like the Havara Agreement. Can you read? I don't know why it's all weird like that. (1933) agreement between Tiny Mustache Man and Z organizations for the reestablishment and the movement of certain people from Germany to Palestine from 1933 to 39. And this was an agreement between Zev Jabotinsky and other people and the Tiny Mustache Man party. Now, why would this be going on? What's going on here? Well, who runs England? According to Quigley on page 499 and 500, the Bank of England, which is run by what private banking elites? Well, let's see. This system, which is at the core of English financial life, has 17 private firms of merchant bankers. And remember, England is a seafaring banking power. It's not a land power, it's a sea power. So it gravitates towards having a navy and control through merchants, right? It's only sensible that a tiny island nation could only rule through trade and a navy. It's not going to rule through a standing army, right? How did they do it? Well, they did it through merchant banking with a total of less than 100 active partners, including the firms of Baring Brothers, N.M. Rothschild, Henry Schroeder, Greenfell, Hambros, and Lazard Brothers. And yes, Hambros is the British intelligence bank that we've covered many times over. This was the heyday of English financial capitalism. It is associated with the governorship of Montague Norman from 1920 to 1944. So there's that. Bank of England runs business. The Big Five controlled 7 of 38 in the case of ownership of 98% of the stock. So it is a banking power, literally. He calls the IMF system a form of feudalized social welfare economy. That's a good way to put it. It's an interlocking dictatorship of cartels. That's what monopoly capitalism is. He talks about the alliance between the Brits and the DuPonts. He talks about the BIS and IG Farben. And the support also, I guess, of Tiny Mustache Man. So many wealthy people saw a benefit to this warfare. And out of this is birthed the European project of creating the EU, the European Common Market, out of World War II, planned in the 1950s at the Bilderberg meeting. And he discusses that on pages 514 and 515. That it's Bilderberg is discussed in many other places. I don't know if I don't think he mentions Bilderberg. He mentions the European Common Market being planned back in 1950. And we saw when we read the Ratio book, that was the OSS and the CIA that was behind that. Next, he talks about what was going on in France at this time. We can't forget France because France, we have the Rothschild, Mirabeau, and the Rothschilds and the Catholics working together as 3 different sets of banking elites that work together to control and to run France. This is his argument. This is probably why in the 1700s the Rothschilds ended up being the official bankers to the Vatican. And we've covered that many times. It's not a conspiracy theory. I mentioned it on Twitter the other day. There's even one of the popes discusses it, and I think there's a papal letter. Rothschild loans to the Holy See. 1830 began in 1832. Even up into Pius IX. You ever heard Catholics talking about this? Did the Roman Catholics ever talk about this? James Flood says, Wikipedia now lists Carroll Quigley as a conspiracy theorist, even though he's like a normie handler to Bill Clinton. It's completely preposterous. Flood, $5. Also of note, Quigley's mentor was Sir Alfred Eckert Zimmern, who was also one of the founders of Royal Institute for International Affairs in Chatham House. Exactly. Good point. P-Man from Tim Dillon. 99% in the next couple of weeks, Israel will finish their operation in Gaza. Iran is next. Charlie Kirk may have been to make America's indecisive. Yeah, we don't know exactly the motive in the terms of the big picture. I don't know. It's unclear. We could definitely look into and consider if Kirk was changing his views on the Middle East. That could definitely have played a factor. Zepp Rider, $20. Banana Bender, what motivation would they have if he refused an offer from Bibi, told the White House not to have the Iran war, and whose death the slop right are demanding a crackdown on the left for? Whose death the slop right? Oh. John Orthodox, $10. Short pamphlet from Blessed Metropolitan Anthony Krapovitsky, Christian Faith and War. Yeah, there's also a great paper at Rocore Studies on that war, we're not pacifists. I don't know where people get this idea. It's totally foreign to the history of the church. That's not it. Somewhere here, there's a classic paper on war. I can't remember the title of it, though. Maybe it's something like Christian Faith and War, Christianity and War. Oh, I think this is it. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, oh, that is it. Okay, so I didn't. The link that the guy was sending was this. Yeah, I read this like 10 years ago. It's a good one. Todd Wood, $20. I hope this is not strange, but I have vinyl records autographed by a relative. Okay, well, I appreciate that. I don't know who Walter is, but I appreciate that, Todd. Let's see. Banana Bender. No, we did that. Zepp, $20. Glitchy Rhythm, $5. Todd Wood, again, $20. Thank you so much. Alderbana became a member. Jordan Johnson, $60. Do you think that Middle Eastern allies were behind Kirk? As I said, we don't know. We shouldn't rush to assume things, but we have to go where the evidence leads and look at who might have had motives. Slowboy Whiteboard, $5. Tolerance is the vice of men with no convictions. Well, it's also a cloak for cowardice, right? One of the elders or saints said that when people talk about compassion and tolerance, when it's inappropriate, it's usually a cloak for their cowardice. So that's not a virtue, it's a vice. John Orthodox. No, we just read that. Banana Bender. He's supposedly, this is the son of a 27-year-old cop. Yep. Biggity said I missed his super chat. You asked me How do we pray for our enemies and turn the other cheek? I'm struggling to understand how we do this. I mean, again, I don't really understand why people have a hard time with this. You must be new to the Bible. The Bible talks about, in many places, self-defense. It doesn't mean to turn the other cheek that you can't defend your family or defend other people. This is a really basic moral principle. It means that if in a situation where you are being persecuted and you don't have a way out of it, let's say that like the army comes to my house and they're going to martyr me, there would be no wisdom, or it would not make sense to fight back, right? That would providentially be a situation where I'm being called to martyrdom. But if it's a situation where somebody comes in the house to try to come after me and my wife and or if I have kids or whatever, I have a duty to stand up against that. And I have a duty to defend them with my life. And in that situation, it's not a crime, it's self-defense, right? So not all killing is the crime of murder. So this is really, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but this is really basic moral stuff that we shouldn't even be having I'm not faulting you. I just don't understand why people have a hard time with this. It's like people don't know anything about the Bible, and they think that turn the other cheek means that you're forever a doormat and you can never be a man. That's just preposterous. Jesus didn't do that. Like it's like everybody just takes one verse and thinks that all of Christianity is that verse or something. That's crazy. I mean, it would contradict the morals of the Bible itself, which tell you in Exodus that you can practice self-defense. The Bank of France ends up being a Rothschild front. And this is where he talks about the Paribas system that ends up being kind of the structure in the system that is everywhere. So a lot of people have never read this book and they don't know. I really think the France chapter is a really interesting, insightful chapter because it talks about this system being set up. He then talks about the New Deal, the banking scam, the back and forth boom bust system as a scam. This begins around page 534. That's where he talks about what you heard me talking about. The Depression and the war solved by fiat debt. How do we get out of these problems? Fiat debt. This is interesting. Kind of in the midst of a section you don't expect, he talks about what's to come. A scientific technocracy is to come. 552. Why? To deal with overpopulation. Page 555. Interesting. Excuse me. That kicks off the next section where he talks about the modern era is a rejection of the classical Christian world for scientism. Again, he's a supporter of this, so that he's a conspiracy theorist is completely ridiculous. He's a apologist for the system. It's completely stupid. He's just telling you how it works. Faradin, $5. What is your opinion of men crying over this on camera, if at all? Keep up the good work. I don't know. I don't know their motivations, if they're really moved, or if they're doing it for attention. It's hard to say. I don't know. Aiden Clark, $5. This is all true, Jay. Everything is being turned fake and gay. Glitchy Rhythm, $5. It's a great video. Thank you. Yake Fake, $20. Thank you so much. 925. What a way, $5. Do a video on the Fabian Society for normies. I mean, I've done I don't know how many talks on this. There's no dumb version that's actually going to wake up normies, man. I don't even know what you're asking. Like, if a person, I have people telling me when I do 2 paragraphs of text, they're not going to read all that. Okay. Stay in your prison. So I don't know what a dumb version of this would even look like. I'm kind of past the point of trying to reach all the dum-dums. I think we're past all that. Like I said on Twitter, this is who you're trying to reason with. You think you're going to reason with these people? You know, Paul talks about being at a place where you actually surrender your reasoning and you're just basically possessed. You're given over. And we need to have the discernment to recognize when you can't reason with a person. Doesn't mean that person can't be saved. But the more wicked a person is, the more mired in these things they are. You also have to think about removing yourself from these people. And I don't want to hear none of this bull crap from the piety goblins and piety signalers about how I would never consider myself better. Oh, are you going to go down to Liberia and start preaching the gospel in the streets? Are you in Saudi Arabia? Or do you know that there's no point in going to Saudi Arabia because they're going to kill you if you start talking about Christ? So I don't want to hear all this keyboard piety signaling. They're actually worse than the online 304s. The piety signalers are worse than whores. Jesus says it. He says that the Pharisees are worse than, because people who are sinners are closer to repenting than these self-righteous wackos. Okay, moving on. There's an interesting chapter about Japan, the power elites in Japan. Nobody ever talks about that. They're actually run by powerful clans that became the corporations. So people don't know. I'm not saying every corporation in Japan is this way, but many of the famous Japanese corporations are actually the clans that were kind of the oligarchy controlling elites. Page 582 and 83 is one of the famous pages in Tragedy and Hope that's quoted a lot about the roundtable groups, and this is the controlling elite. He says, they have developed a more moderate roundtable group with Lionel Curtis, Leonard Amory, who is the protege of Lord Milner, Lord Lothian, Lord Brand. They sought to weaken League of Nations and strengthen Germany. So you see there was a kind of a split amongst members of this roundtable. They wanted to free Britain from Europe. They wanted an Atlantic bloc of Great Britain, the United States, and the British Dominions. They wanted to part ways with the EU. And they wanted a Rhodes Scholarship program to promote this. This is what Chatham House was intended to be used for, as well as the RIIA and the CFR that would be set up in New York. Now, again, people need to understand, like, when you hear me talk about this stuff, I'm not making it up. It's right here. Look, read the chapter, read the page for yourself. See that? All these institutions and entities that you hear me always talking about, it's right there. That is page 582. Now, if you want to support the stream, you can do so through Super Chats, Streamlabs, or natively through YouTube, as we said. This chapter also is the chapter that you may have heard me referring to when I did a 5-hour debate stream on Twitter debating the Tiny Mustache Man followers. People have asked me, where is that? Where is that? It's on my Rockfin, and it's for the members at the website. If you are interested, you come over here to log me out of Rockfin. Let's see here. It might be a second for me to... I'm not sure what I titled that, but it would be a few months ago. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here's where we're covering foreign nation involvement in JFK. That's an important one. All right, should be right around in here. What did I title that? Dang it. I don't remember what I titled it. I mean, I know there is a 5-hour audio thing I uploaded, but the challenge in a lot of this stuff, I don't understand why on so many websites and so many things the search doesn't work. Isn't that weird? Like, why do they not want? Do they not want? I mean, I'm not accusing Rockfin of, like, it's not a conspiracy, but it's like you have to get the title exactly right. You know what I mean? All right, let's see. It should be in here. And this is worth listening to because if you want to go into more depth with this subject matter of the funders of Tiny Mustache Man, this is a good talk if I can find it. Oh, no, that's not it. Heated Protestant debates. That's not it. Does anyone know what that's titled? I could probably find it easier in the website members section than. I just don't even remember what I titled it. No, that's 5 hours of Muslim debates. Sneeko, oh my gosh. No, I don't know what I titled that. You can blame the internet for all the censorship that they can't find anything, but Hitler debate, that's it. Thank you. Let's see if we can find it that way. Thank you. I know that's what I titled it on X, but I might have actually put the real title here. Put it in quotation marks. I shouldn't have to put in quotation marks for here. Here, let's try it this way. I know it's on Rockfin. I don't know. I can't find it. It's on here somewhere. JB Peltier, $10. People don't understand how an ideology can capture the minds of young people without their learning about it, and as if in a classroom. There's no slow boy explanation for large-scale social engineering yet. Walter Bosley, $20. You did Todd Wood, $20. Walter Bosley did the 2015 Secret Space Program conference. Yes, I remember him. I'm familiar with that. I just don't understand what you're saying about vinyl records. Oh, Walter in your show. JB Peltier, $10. Or excuse me, Yosh, $10. Recently I began digging into orthodoxy after being evangelicals, frustrated with bad theology and Protestants not following up with the apostolic fathers. Orthodoxy is truly based, is the answer. Well, yeah, just remember that don't convert to this religion because you're looking for some political based system. Because really it's going to be about your own transformation. Robin Rage, $5. At least the godless left are actually consistent. Unaliving and cheering these things is their worldview. No God means there are no values. Everything's fake and gay. You make your own. You're your own God. You make your own values. So yeah, they're pretty consistent with that. Anyway, the 7-point deal, the secret 7-point deal, the dual appeasement plan. I've covered that in many talks. The dual policy. That's the next several chapters here in Tragedy and Hope, and we will be getting into more of Kalergi and what he talks about in his book, Practical Idealism. We'll get into more of the details also in Quigley's addendum, and I'll analyze how the recent big events tie into things like Gladio in more detail, the pattern, the structure there. I'm going to talk about the history of the Hashashim, the medieval Islamic assassins, and the idea of big-scale assassination events, where this comes from, the history of it. Richard Adams, $50. The murderer was a M agent to his right. Well, that's not been demonstrated yet. So there's definitely a lot of theories. We'll have to see where the evidence goes. But a lot of people, everybody is immediately crafting and trying to tell a story that they want their bad guys to be true. In the last several days, what has come to light is that he is definitely part of a TRANZ community, and it was over the race stuff and the anti-TRANZ stuff, as I said from the get-go. The first thing I said was, I bet this is a leftist racial provocation, or it's related to the TRANZ stuff, given the fact that we covered BX's essays and the interview that we did with BX, which I think, I just shared that with you guys. That also is not allowable here, right? Let's see. The TRANZ stuff that's happening, there's a long history of this in terms of cult groups, satanic groups, online cult groups, which she has researched and tracked, and that's in her research. We will get into more of that in part 2, which probably is a little too spicy for where we're going to go in part 1 of this stream. So there is my Rockfin interview with her. And again, she's tracked the last several mass pew-pew events by the TRANZ, and there's commonalities with a lot of the online forums, discords, and groups that they're part of. And some of those tie into TRANZ cults and satanic cults and networks. So there's a lot of parallels as to why, if this person is a PATSY, we don't know that yet, but if they are, it might be out of these groups, which are perfect for the recruitment to do these kinds of things, to entrap and to provoke, to agitate, to get people wound up to do these types of things out of these online groups and networks. But it's too early to know exactly, although what I said has been exactly correct. Now, as soon as I said this is probably a racial provocation, people said, what are you going to do when it turns out to be a white SJW liberal? And I'm like, you don't know that they worship BLM and that they're on the attack because of racism? Again, the media portrayal of Trump, Charlie Kirk, who are all moderates, as tiny mustache men, is giving the go to these goblins to be violent. They know that. That's why they do that. And that's why the Democrat leaders and officials can openly call for violence. Right? So that we'll get into that in part 2. This is a part 1. We're doing a 10-year anniversary return to Tragedy and Hope. We got through the first half of it here. And then we'll get into, for the members in part 2, the second half, and Kalergi and Gladio and Anglo-American Establishment and BX's research, the esoteric stuff in the sense of the online groups that we talked about, some of the satanic cults. And people aren't talking about, remember the interview that we did with Chiller Queen, where she had done a lot of research on the Mormon satanic cults. Nobody's talking about the odd elements of the kid being in a Mormon circles and spheres. I'm not saying every Mormon is a Satanist directly, but there were, in the Hamlin case last year, a massive satanic network within Mormonism uncovered. Nobody's talking about that. We're in Gladio D now, exactly. Gladio double D. Do you guys remember that interview with Chiller Queen? The Inter-Mormon Satanic Cult of David Hamlin. Right there. Crispy, 20 pounds. Jay, I appreciate your work greatly. Thank you so much. Hauling the goods, $20. This is a lot of information. Very good to know and keep up with. Right. So we're situating the 20th century with how we got to this liberal monoculture world order, which ultimately is a kind of Fabian socialism. Remember, Fabian socialism is Marxism melded with monopoly capitalism. So it's those two things together. And even though Gladio was a CIA-run operation against Soviets, we needn't fall into the assumption that therefore makes it conservative. It's not. Remember, the CIA put out foreign affairs essays a year ago saying, and doing their history, saying, we were never right-wing. We were anti-Soviet, but the CIA has never been right-wing. That's exactly true. That's exactly the point we're making here. It is a Fabian socialist institution. That's why all the heads of the CIA, or the OSS and early heads of the CIA, were openly Fabian socialists, you see. Yes, the problem is, people were writing about Gladio prior to her, but they didn't know that it was Gladio. For example, the God's Bankers, Roberto Calvo exposés, they were talking about these networks, but nobody knew that it was called Gladio until the 90s. And I'm not saying that this is the same people. It's the same type of operations that are run. High-profile political unalivings, mass SHOOTINGS, those things are all the Bologna events. Those are all explicitly part of Gladio. So that's a technique and a strategy that's used, and it could be used by people on the right or the left, right? It's a power structure strategy. It's not ultimately about right or left, right? So that's what we'll get into in part 2, and we will dive into the psychology, the psychosis from BX's research and writings for the members in the next couple days. Leech, thank you so much. Appreciate that. A Panini, help us settle something. Gold or Bitcoin? Bitcoin. By the way, if you want to get started with Bitcoin, as we have had at least 500 or 600 people already gotten started with. I didn't realize that many of you guys had gotten in, but I appreciate that. That's good. That's good news. There's the Swan Bitcoin link right there. It's really Bitcoin only. It's a Bitcoin only company. And you can click the link there if you want to get started. I'm not a registered financial advisor, but I do believe in it. And it's up to you if you think, after doing your own research, it's something to look into. Remember, we did just lecture through Saifedean Amos's book, The Bitcoin Standard. It was a great overall history of money. The majority of that book was a critique of Keynesianism and a look at the history of sound money, and then kind of the arguments and value proposition as to why Bitcoin fits the bill. I support that. Also, if you want to get started with helping out your health, head on over to chalk.com and use the promo code JAY40 to get 40% off all those great products at chalk.com, CHOQ.com, the best in supplementation on the internet. I especially love that testosterone boosting Tonkat Ali. I take that on the regular. I really do. The performance enhancing Chad mode is great for the gym. This is not like PP pills. I don't know where people go, oh, he's selling PP pills. No, this is gym adjacent workout stuff. So make use of those promo codes. Get over there at chalk.com. Use the promo code J44Life. That's JAY44LIFE to get 44% off all those great products at chalk.com. Hit like and share. Let's see. Leech became a member. What's up? The member streams, by the way, are not immediate. It might take me a day or two to do the part 2 of this. By the way, as we do the part 2, we'll have more information on what all is coming out. So it'll be a better, higher quality member stream as we get a little more information. Sir Rob, $10. Jay, I'm sorry that you don't know about the history of the block size wars. I know all about it. I know about Roger Ver. I know about Bcash. I'm well aware of that. Bitcoin was hijacked. Yeah, I've heard this story. The real Bitcoin is BSV, right? So the thing created by scammers and headed up by scammers is the real Bitcoin. And that's why BSV's value is collapsing against Bitcoin. Sorry, Sir Rob, I don't buy it. And I'm well aware of it. Hauling the goods, $20. A lot of information. The guy had a TRANZ boyfriend. Yes, exactly as I said would be the case, because I was DMing with BX actually yesterday, and I said, I'm getting the sense that this will probably be a TRANTIFA person. Whether that's a PATSY remains to be seen. I'm aware of all these different theories and scenarios. As information comes out, we'll have better pictures, hopefully, to try to paint of what went down. Crispy, 20 pounds. Appreciate your work greatly, Jay. In what amounts to probably the biggest high-profile political event, ASS event in decades. What's the next biggest, most recent event? I'm trying to think of who was like. Remember Benazir Bhutto? Was that the last big one? Well, they tried to kill. Remember, then they tried to assassinate Bolsonaro. I mean, I'm not saying that Bolsonaro is perfect. I'm just trying to think of recent political assassination attempts. Well, I know about Trump. Obviously, we did videos on that, but I'm talking about people that were actually unalived. Shinzo Abe. I forgot about that one. That was one. Yeah. Can you guys think of any others? Probably back to JFK and RFK. Yeah, that's probably the last that was this high profile, you know. Leech, thank you for gifting those memberships. Appreciate that. All right, so we've set the stage. We're looking at high-profile stuff. I forgot. I wanted to get a little more into, but I probably can't on the live stream. I did want to talk about the Hashashim. And I know Cotel did a stream on this. But prior to, this is a pretty good one here.
Freedom.
Prior to Dr. David Patrick Harry doing his video a while back, I had actually been also on my own researching the Hashashim and Hassan al-Sabah. So I do have some notes in my notebook on that I want to get to about the history of them, because they are very relevant to the history of terror. And speaking of that, I also got Paul Williams' book on Al-Qaeda. So it turns out Paul Williams, the guy that wrote one of the really good Gladio books, he also wrote a book on the history of Al-Qaeda, which it's not very long, so we might look at that in part 2, because that plays into this. Otherwise, everybody have a good night, and I will talk to you soon. Also, remember, you can get signed copies of Esoteric Hollywood 3 coming out very soon at jaysanalysis.com in the shop.